All right, the recording is on now. This is, I think, the 12th session. We're going to be starting chapter 1 on page 27 this evening. So we got through the introduction last week, and it took us, well, 11 sessions to do that. But we're on our usual pace, I'd say. Pretty much the same. What Rohr was doing in the introduction was just setting the stage for us, setting the stage in the most basic way for contemplative practice, since this book is about contemplative practice. And I think you'll find, through the introduction, but also going into chapter 1, he's going to keep coming back to the central theme and the titular theme of the book, which is just this. And it's the idea that if we can't make our moments be just this, about just this, experiencing and perceiving just this, that what is just in front of us, nothing more, nothing less, just to be here in this moment, to be awed by the moment, to surrender to the moment, to be able to see the significant, or I should say, to see the divine in the insignificant, in the everyday occurrences of life, then we're either not ready for contemplative practice, or we're still banging against the door and maybe fighting our own instincts, which is to look for the spectacular. That's what we normally want to do. We want to see God in the spectacular. We imagine these spectacular things for ourselves and everything around us. But contemplation is going to look in the opposite direction. If you think about Jesus' kingdom, it's all upside down, back to front, inside out. Everything that Jesus teaches us is going against our normal grain, going against the normal current, going against our instinctual way of looking at things, counterintuitive always. And so contemplation is going to take us in those same sort of directions. It's always going to be back to front, upside down, inside out. And so being able to look in the insignificant places, to just see between the cracks, is what the contemplative mind is really all about, increasing our awareness to that point. So he's going to take that further forward now with this first chapter, which is a moment of awe. And before we dive in on page 27, is there anything about the introduction, anything about your last week of experience, anything I just said that you want to comment on, clarify before we dive in? Okay, cool. Well, let's read this first section, The Divine Ambush, which starts with a poem, and then we'll come back and we'll deconstruct it a little bit. How about that? So chapter 1, page 27, A Moment of Awe, starts with a poem. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells, selves, goes itself. Myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more. The just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is. Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. And that was Gerard Manley Hopkins, As Kingfishers Catch Fire. Turning the page, The Divine Ambush. I wonder if the only way that conversion, enlightenment, and transformation can happen is by a kind of divine ambush. It seems the ego has to be caught off guard to give up its constant surveillance. As long as you are fully in control, you're going to keep trying to steer the ship using your practiced responses. So you need to do some new practices to rewire the old system. The only way you will let yourself be ambushed is by trusting the ambusher and learning to trust that the darkness of such trustful intimacy will lead to depth, safety, freedom, and even love. I find that people are most likely to change when they are held inside of both safety and some necessary conflict, some tradition and some newness at the exact same time. God can then come to you indirectly, catching you off guard and free you from your illusions of control. When you are at least somewhat empty instead of full of yourself, then the ambush can happen. You only know it has happened after the fact, perhaps days or weeks or even years later. One day you will realize, God is so real to me now. How did I get here? All you know is that you did not engineer or even imagine this for yourself or by yourself. It is always done unto you. And you realize quite gratefully that you were ambushed by a big love. Okay. Any comments?
That was really good.
Yeah.
I'm
Good.
waiting.
What was that, Bill?
I'm waiting.
You're waiting? What the heck is he talking about?
I'm stuck on held inside of both safety and some necessary conflict.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's get back to there, because if we start breaking this down, maybe it'll start come clearer. But we'll get back to that. Because yes, that's a tough one, Lori. Very counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, to me, the word ambush has a negative connotation. Yes, surprise, I ambush you.
Mm-hmm.
Consequence.
Yep. But we're going to try to see it in a positive way, Ellen. How about that? You know, it's interesting. Brennan Manning said the exact same thing, you know, that he was ambushed by God. And that was the beginning of his spiritual journey. But he was ambushed by God in a little chapel, you know, just came at him sideways, had this experience that he wasn't expecting and wasn't particularly looking for at the time. But it was like an ambush. So any of you feel like you were ambushed by God at any point in your lives? Where this presence, this something came into you when you least expected? Ken, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So ambush is a good word for that, to express the experience?
It was for me.
Okay. Well, let's see if at the end of this section that we can see ambush in a different light. First thing we need to do is tackle this poem. Did that poem make sense to anybody?
No.
No, no, you have to decode it for us.
Okay, so let's decode a little bit, because there's a lot here. And what I want to do, he left out the first 4 lines of the poem. So I'm going to read the whole poem to you, and we'll break it down. But the first 4 lines read this way. Remember, the title is As Kingfishers Catch Fire. Y'all know what a kingfisher is?
Mm-hmm.
Kingfisher is a smallish bird, and there's all different varieties of them. But it's the most colorful bird, one of the most colorful birds in England. And Hopkins was an Englishman. And so they're kind of small. They can be all different colors. They can be reds and blues and all different shades of this and that. But they're very colorful, and that's an important piece of this. So here's the first 4 lines. Just listen. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim and roundy wells, stones ring. Like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung, finds tongue to fling out broad its name.
Easy
All right.
for you to see.
I know. So what he's giving us are 2 visuals and 3 oral examples of where he's going to go with this in the first printed line in the book. So he's got I cannot say that word, as kingfishers catch fire. So when the sunlight hits the bird, it just lights up. It reflects, and all those colors are very bright. Same thing with dragonflies. If you've ever watched a dragonfly, when the sunlight hits it, that iridescence comes off its body and the wings seem to glitter. So he's saying this is the essence of these birds and these insects coming out as they just pass before your eyes. Then he gives us 3 oral illustrations. As tumbled over rim and roundy wells, stones ring. If you throw a rock into a well, it's going to bounce off the sides. It's going to splash in the water at the bottom. You're going to hear the sound of it. as each tucked string tells. You pluck a string on a stringed instrument and it's going to give you the note. And then as each hung bell's bow swung, finds tongue to fling out broad its name, when you ring a bell. So what he's talking about is in the world out there, all of these things, whether they're birds or insects, stones, strings, bells, they are going to do what they do. Their essential nature is coming out both in sight and in sound. Okay? So with that in mind, then the next line, each mortal thing does one thing and the same. So he's going to make that connection now from all of those illustrations that he gave us in the first 4 lines to each one of us. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being, indoors each one dwells. You get where he's going there? He's saying every mortal thing does what the kingfisher and the dragonflies and the stones and the strings and the bells do. Whatever it is that we've got inside, as we go through life, make choices and do what we do, we are telegraphing that. We're bringing it outward. People will be able to see us, see who we are through the way that we move through life and the choices that we make. Next line, selves. Now he's using this noun as a verb. So it would be as if, each mortal thing dealing out its indoor self, itself, right? Itself, goes itself. Myself, it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, and for that I came. So whatever it is that I have inside, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to be telegraphing outward. What we are and who we are, we're revealing our identity in everything that we do. Making sense so far? But then he goes on. He says, but I say more. The just man justices. Now he's using the noun as a verb again. The just man justices. The just man does justice, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces. So the just man is going to do justice. The just man is also going to be a repository for grace, going to have grace inside, which is going to keep all his goings graces. Everything that he does, he's going to do gracefully. He's going to act gracefully. Acts in God's eye. What in God's eye he is. So we're talking about the faith walk here, right? Faith is action, but faith is acting as if what we say we believe is really true. Because we are really what we are in God's eyes. And only when we reflect God's values are we what we were meant to be. So the just man justices, does justice, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces. He's acting gracefully, acting in God's eye what in God's eye he is. What is that? Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places. This is where it gets really interesting. Lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his. To the Father through the features of men's faces. So Christ is what we are in God's eyes when we are acting as God acts, which is Christ is God in human form, the incarnation, right? Lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. He's talking about a universal Christ here. He's talking about Christ being played out in each one of us as we become more and more transformed to reflect God's values, to love what God loves, to take pleasure in what God takes pleasure in, to delight in what God delights in. In other words, his will is being done in us. His kingdom is coming in us as we become transformed more and more to just do in our lives naturally what God does. And then we are the Christ in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his. To the Father, through the features of men's faces. Now thoughts. Did I do the poem a little bit of justice here?
I'm glad you read it because otherwise it sounds like Dr. Seuss to me.
Yeah, well,
Makes sense. That
No, Dr. Seuss is easier. Understand? Pop on pop, really, that's easy.
I have to say, I read it about 4 times and it still made no sense to me until Dave did his.
hopefully it makes a little more sense now. Yes, he's a tough one to read. We're talking about a 150-year-old piece of literature from England. But yes, he's pretty dense, both in his content, his subject matter, but also in the way that he structures the sentences, right? Structures the lines, I guess I should say, not sentences. It's just not the way that we normally speak, obviously. But what he's saying is something very interesting here. He's basically saying, hey, all of us are going to go through life like birds and dragonflies and stones and strings and bells. We're going to be telegraphing who we are. And all we can do is what we do based on who we are inside. But as we become more and more transformed to God, as we become just, we're going to do justice. We're going to keep grace. Everything we do is going to be gracefully. And then we will be acting in God's eye the way that God actually sees us, as himself in human form, as God in human form, playing this Christ in 10,000 places. So it's an interesting take on the meaning of Christ, because we always equate Christ just with Jesus. But basically, we all can take part and participate. In other words, he's saying that Jesus is not just the vicarious atonement for us that stands apart from humanity and does all the work for us, that we are also participants in this. And we are also parts of Christ in terms of God's hands and feet walking across the face of the earth and doing the things that God would do as we become more and more transformed, more and more in his image.
So am I incorrect in my assertion that I probably am, that this may have been written in Elizabethan era kind of lingo?
No,
No.
he's 19th century, so he would be
Oh.
late 1800s. Yeah, so a couple hundred years after that.
It's more like Victorian, right?
Yeah, it would be Victorian. Exactly. Exactly.
It's
So
still
he's
so difficult.
he's saying us being Christ-like is what he's saying, Dave. Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes. But he's
Within
saying
our own
if we
individual way.
understand Christ as the incarnation of God in human form, what he's basically saying is we share in that. We also are, as we become more and more Christ-like, we are more and more becoming God in human form, acting as God acts, choosing as God chooses. That there's a participation there between the two of us. We're not
Right.
just bystanders waiting to be saved. We're also living this out at the same time, if we're willing to be transformed.
Meaning not only do we become Christ-like, but over time we become Christ. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to theologically deal with that,
Assertion.
and the preeminence of Christ and all of those theological issues. But that is the Eastern Orthodox take. I mean, for Eastern Orthodox, to be saved is not just it's not an event, it's a process. So in the West, salvation is more of an event. We're baptized, we say the sinner's prayer, we do whatever we need to do, and then we're saved. And then the big debate, well, can you lose your salvation after you have it and all that sort of thing? But it's more of an event. To the Eastern Church and to the early church, it was a process. You're following a way. The Eastern Orthodox Church calls this theosis, which literally means divination. It means to become like God. Now they understand that you're not God, but you're becoming more and more identified with and identical with God the further you move into this. This is basically what Hopkins is talking about, this process of becoming more and more transformed and living in the image of God.
Isn't it like parallels to like the Buddhist concept of nirvana?
Well,
Oh?
yeah, I mean, enlightenment. It
Yeah,
would be enlightenment
enlightenment.
probably more than nirvana, but yes.
It
Yeah.
seems more what's the word I'm looking for? just realistic in sense of what would Jesus do in this situation? How would Jesus act? How would Jesus behave? Is that kind of what he's saying by becoming Christ-like? Or going back to your question of what does love call for in this situation and being
It's
Christ-like?
not, it's not about just obedience. It's not just about
Okay. Behavior.
conforming to what Jesus would do, but it's an inside out transformation to where everything that we value is what God values, so that we're not following a law or a rule anymore that is restricting our choices or restricting our behavior or even our thought patterns. We're just doing what we naturally do, unbridled and unfettered, and it looks like law. It looks like God because we've been transformed from the inside out. That's really more what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And that just comes from spending time in God's presence more and more. It's just like, a married couple that's been together. Bill and Gail, how long you guys been married? You're muted.
What time is it?
47.
47.
See, 47 years. I knew it was a long time. So, they can finish each other's sentences now, right? Because they've been intimately connected for such a long time. And that stuff rubs off, right? That's what we're talking about. The more time we spend with God outside of the egoic consciousness, so we're just there, we're present, the more and more he's going to rub off on us. The more and more we're going to be transformed. The more and more we're just going to naturally love the things that he loves. That's what we're talking about. It's kind of that almost like a process of osmosis, where if we make the choice to keep showing up, stuff is going to happen that we don't even know anything about. Again, like that farmer who plants the seed, goes to sleep, and stuff happens while he's sleeping. It's that kind of idea.
Is that what sanctification is?
Yeah, you could look at it that way. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, even in the West, we have the idea of sanctification where we're becoming more and more, Christ-like through the action of the Spirit. But there's a distinction between sanctification and salvation. In the East, they would be basically the same thing. The sanctification is the salvation. It is the theosis. It is the becoming.
So I don't mind being the hands and feet of God. To me, that's easy. But to be Christ-like, that's hard.
Why do you make the distinction, Ellen?
Because that's a different state of mind. Well, I struggle. I have this struggle to, like, forgiveness. There's somebody I cannot forgive. I'm having a hard time. It's very Christ-like to forgive and turn the other cheek. I'm having a hard time. But I can be a hands and feet and be a servant. That is easy.
To riff off what Ellen, you were saying earlier, this idea of becoming more like Christ. I think what the poet is talking about here as well is seeing Christ in other people. Like when you see other people and you can see the face of God in the other person, right? The person we're not, I don't know if this is a right way of saying it, but if we can get to the level of whoever the person it is that we can't forgive, that's a part of Christ, right? That's a part of God. That's that person is a manifestation is one manifestation of a part of God, essentially. And if we can get to the place where I am not striving to be Christ-like alone, but I'm seeing Christ in other people that I interact with, then I think that am I reading that right, Dave? Is that kind of where he's going in those last two lines there?
I think you're spot on. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it in the
sometimes-
effect? Was it in this class that I heard this woman that had a very hard time forgiving someone? And so she was told to picture herself standing at the feet of the cross and transforming the face of that person that she was having such a hard time forgiving onto the face of Christ.
Mm,
And that was when she could forgive. Was that here in one of your book clubs?
I don't think so. I don't recall
I
that.
remember that
But
one.
but that's not bad, in terms of being able to, as William was saying, see God in everything, because God is in everything.
Yeah.
And so each person, each kingfisher, each dragonfly, if we can't see God there, then how in the world are we ever going to see him anywhere else?
Mm-hmm.
We imagine that we're going to know him when we see him, but if we can't recognize him here and now in these small everyday things, then we're not in the right frame of mind. We're not in the right space to be able to recognize him anywhere, because
Mm.
God is unassuming. He isn't that big, spectacular thing that we imagine, even though, yes, the scripture is written that way. But when it comes right down to it, Jesus is saying, you don't need to see the Father, you've seen me. Well, who is he? He was someone who didn't stand out in a crowd. The authorities who wanted to kill him had to pay Judas to point him out. It wasn't like he was 6'5", blue eyes and blonde hair in a group of short Palestinians, right? He didn't stand out. The passage in Isaiah that is usually attributed to the Messiah is that there's nothing attractive in him that you would be attracted to. This idea that Jesus is the person who washes the feet of even those that are supposed to be his disciples. He's showing us who this God is. If we haven't made that turn to be looking for God there, then how do we think we're going to find him? So that counterintuitive, back to front, upside down, inside outness of Jesus' ministry, that he's trying to show us the identity of the Father. And yes, that means the Father is in every face that we see. Mother Teresa was brilliant at this too. She talked about Christ coming in the disguise of every face that she saw. Same idea. Yeah, William, go ahead.
Well, I like that Mother Teresa comment because it bridges my next thought here. This idea that Christ plays in the 10,000 places. I am thinking of the 10,000 places makes me think of the 10,000 selves that the Buddhist talks about. Like there is no self, there is 10,000 selves, which are just different manifestations of the ego. If that's what he's saying, I think that's a really cool thought. But Christ is in each of those parts of myself, my jealous self, my angry self, my loving self, that Christ is still in there. And I think that's it's not just seeing Christ, but I'm seeing Christ in the egoic mistakes or egoic functionings of the other.
Wow.
Dave, this takes me back to what you were saying in church, that about forgiveness, and this kind of goes to what Ellen had said about forgiveness. Forgiveness equals freedom, and how that equates in my simple mind is that, and I've said this before to you, that I don't have the power of forgiveness of another. I don't have a magic wand to say you are forgiven, go in peace. But I can give that person to their God, to their higher power, to whatever their understanding is, and walk away and be at peace with that, knowing that God is taking care of another one of his kids, for whom I have absolutely no understanding, let alone at the time perhaps any kind of love, if you will. That has worked for me in many cases. And one in particular, and now I see that person, and I see him. I don't feel bad feelings toward that person, and he won't talk to me, doesn't matter to me.
Mm.
What matters is how I feel toward that person, and I feel goodness and clarity of thought, um, and certainly no angst, whatever on my part. If he would say something to me, I would say something in kind.
Hmm.
I have allowed him. I, I have allowed. Listen, I have given him to his higher power, and let his higher power uh, deal with that. Let him deal with his higher power, his God.
Mhm.
Just as I'm sure many people have done that with me, and for that I'm at peace. I don't have any. I have no bad feelings or any of that sort of any of that sort toward that person. Just another person to me. He means nothing to me, but I
Mm.
wish him well.
Mm.
Somebody, and I was taught early on, um, pray for that person and pray for everything for that person that you want for yourself. And I just thought, well, screw that. The guy can kiss a frog for all I care. Um, in nicer terms. Um, yeah, and that's a little contempt on my part, maybe a lot of contempt, but I mean that's basically where I came from, and so I just decided that I would give that person to their higher power and step away,
Mm.
and as a result, I found freedom from it, and I didn't. That person didn't live rent free in my head anymore.
Mm.
Eventually, not right away, but eventually. For me,
Mhm.
that's been a process.
Absolutely, John. It is a process, but when you think about it, it's a transformative process,
Of
you
course.
know, because you're not trying to be good toward this guy anymore. You're free of all of that anger, resentment, and everything else that went along with the victimization that you originally felt. It takes a lot of energy to be angry, a lot of energy to be resentful. To be free
Mhm.
of that is amazing. And the Chinese have the concept of wei wu wei, do not do, the idea of effortless effort. When we get to the point that we really know something, we can just do it. We don't have to think about it anymore. It just flows like walking across a room or speaking our language that we know, our native language. And so to get to the place where, as Ellen was saying, being God's hands and feet, she made a distinction between that and being Christ-like. I don't know that there is a distinction. I see them as one and the same. But being God's hands and feet, just doing good things, is, unless and until it actually starts doing the work of transforming us into people that naturally do those things. We don't have to think about them even as good deeds. They're just the only deeds. It's just what we do. Now we're free. And that law of liberty that James talks about is what's really coming to the fore here when we get to the point that we're really transformed. And then we're just doing what we would do. We couldn't think or be happy doing anything else, because it's who we are. And then that's what we're going to be telegraphing with all of our choices back to the poem again. But we're getting a lot of mileage out of 14 lines of poetry. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. See how much was there, though, and what he wrote, how dense it is, how deep it is. There's just a lot of stuff there. And then it brings up all the questions that we're batting around here for the last half hour. But that's the beauty of poetry. There's so much condensed in such a small space. And the only way that you can express some of these deep, deep truths are through the poetry, through the metaphor and through the figures of speech, the analogies, the similes, and everything that poetry uses to evoke a feeling, to evoke a truth, the experience of a truth. So that's why it's there.
Mm.
Well, let's read another paragraph and see how much more trouble we can get into, because he's going to be talking about that transformation. And that transformation is so fundamental. It's so foundational. It's so complete. that it's very difficult for us to inch up on it under our own steam, right? I mean, how do you go half the distance and half the distance and half the distance and actually get to where you're going, right? You'll never get there if you're only just going half the distance. So us on our own steam trying to get to this place of transformation is literally impossible. That's why the divine ambush comes into play as he's talking about it. Something that completely breaks the line of thought, breaks the logic and the rationale for the way that we're approaching something. And we get this flash of seeing another there out there that we hadn't seen before. But as he says, it needs to come to us at a time when we're kind of undefended egoically. We're not really so much thinking about all of that. And it has a way of just breaking through. And then when we have a vision of something else, now we can start making the necessary changes in direction to actually get someplace else. Whereas before, you know, keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. That's what really, literally what we're doing until we can see that there is another there out there someplace.
Dave,
So he says, I'm sorry, did someone want to say something?
Yeah, Dave,
Yeah.
can you elaborate a second on an ambush from life as opposed to this divine ambush? What I mean,
I don't know that he's making a distinction between the two. The ambush does not need to be, as we would understand, you know, a divine vision or a divine or a theophany, you know, a God showing up. Yes, it can be life as well. It's whatever in life is intense enough to break down that ironclad egoic understanding, you know, that certainty or the way that we think the world works, something that breaks that open.
so
It can be a spiritual experience, but I think it also can be a great loss in life as well.
okay.
Yeah,
Something that propels you to, I guess if you're in your comfort level, you're not going to think about it when things are going good.
exactly.
And when
Mhm.
something difficult happens, it seems like we are more open to what God may be trying to speak to us as opposed to blaming him for letting it happen.
Right.
Remember how Rohr said in the last book that we read, Falling Upward, he said that the two paths to this
Yeah.
kind of transformation, great
Love
suffering
and
and great
suffering.
love. And so
Yeah.
it can be the great sufferings that, you know, occur to us, the traumas of life and so on and so forth. But it can also be where love breaks through, you know, when they put that baby on your chest or, you know, or it can be anything where you break through to a connection with a person, place, or thing that again just opens that up. And for a moment, you see beyond. You see beyond the filter because we're all just looking at the screens of our minds, really, and thinking that it's reality. But when something that intense opens that up for just a second and we see there's a whole other vista, something else out there, that's the divine ambush as I'm seeing it.
I think, Dave, for me, like I never thought of it as an ambush, but the way it might show up for me, it's when I have all I've already known something, but I'm not allowing myself to live that with a particular person. So like I can't see the Christ face in a particular person, or I can't experience that sonship. And I can think of, it's really weird how I can almost compartmentalize like these deep, profound understandings and keep them separate from a relationship that needs work, essentially. And
Okay. Yeah.
and then I would have these moments where I'm listening to something you guys are talking about, or I'm going back and listening to one of your messages, and it's like, ah, crap. Like I gotta, you know, it's like that forgiveness stuff, right? It's like, ah, damn it. Like we got
No divine ambush there, William.
yeah. um but I can it happens a lot, and it's amazing how easy it is that I can keep my spirituality separate from my reality. and it's yeah, yeah.
That's great. But you said it doesn't necessarily feel like an ambush to you, but here's the essential characteristic of an ambush, right? It's not expected.
Mm.
That's the essential characteristic of an ambush. I know we're thinking of it in a malevolent way, that you're being ambushed, you're being attacked, but the essential characteristic is that you don't expect it. It's coming from someplace you weren't expecting. And that's the key. Where we are directing our attention consciously is our most defended spot, right? It's the place where our logic and our rationale and our worldview is the thickest, because that's the thing that we're looking through the filter. When something comes from the side where we don't expect it, it can get underneath the filter. And then suddenly we're able to see something that we just didn't even think existed before, or in a way that we didn't think existed before. And
I
so the
wonder if-
essential, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the word intervention would be appropriate in the place of the word ambush.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
so. Yeah, yeah. I mean, to the extent that the intervention is an
Especially
ambush.
if it was.
because interventions, the way we practice them, are ambushes, right? Which is one of the things that people don't like about them.
But see, the thing too, so this is my egoic mind thinking. Ambush to me is lying in wait. There's deception in it. It's a trap.
Well, that's just one way of looking at an ambush, but we're just talking about something that comes to us as we're just walking down the path. We didn't see it coming. Here it is. Boom.
Right.
Like in this case, there's no malevolence implied, but it's still an ambush.
I mean, you can be
You can
ambushed.
be ambushed. You can be ambushed in love, right? What's a surprise party but an ambush, right?
Mhm.
Dave, I don't know why, but I went back to the very beginning of the book, All in Surrendering to It. This is Isaiah 63, and this is what helped me. I am ready to be approached by those who do not study me, ready to be found by those who do not seek me. I say, I am here. I am here to people who do not even invoke my name. For me, that helped me understand this. That he's
That's
here and
perfect.
he's
Thank you,
ready.
Terry.
And even if I don't invoke his name, he's going to be there for me.
Mhm.
I don't know. That just took me back to that at the very beginning.
There is, at the very beginning of the movie Gladiator, y'all remember the movie Gladiator?
Yeah,
Yeah.
With what's his name?
Russell
Anyway,
Crowe.
Phoenix.
Russell Crowe. There is this one scene right at the beginning that tells you everything you need to know about the gladiator's character going forward. He's getting ready for this huge battle. He's battle weary. He's been fighting for years. He misses his home. He hasn't been home in years. And he's this battle hardened character, and he's surveying the battlefield and knows what he needs to do. And his face is like set in stone. And all of a sudden you see him look off frame, and then they cut to just this little tiny bird just flitting around on a branch in a tree. And as he looks at the bird, his whole face just softens and grows into a slight smile. And then the bird flies away and he watches it. And then he looks back at the battlefield and his face clouds back over again and hardens. He was ambushed by a bird. Think of it that way. In the midst of everything that he was doing, this thing came in from the side and brought beauty and color and life and memories of home and everything that it was bringing back to him in that instant. And he went with it. And then he had to return to the task at hand. Are we the kind of people that are willing, able, and ready to be ambushed by the insignificant, to let a moment awe us and then surrender to that awe, to that shock, to that opening up something? That's what we're talking about. It can be the slightest thing. I know ambush is a big word and it carries a lot of connotation, but if we can think of it that way, how many times have you just been caught off guard and drawn into whatever it happens to do? Jerry and her grandchildren, I can imagine when she's there, the grandchildren are always pulling you away from all the cares of the adult world, and suddenly you're sitting on the floor entering into a different world. Kids and dogs and nature has the ability to do that. And that is where we need to be ready, willing, and able to go. Because contemplatively, that's what it's all about.
When you say it's an unexpected event or an unexpected encounter, would be a definition for this type of ambush.
Yeah, yeah. I could say something that intrudes, comes into our awareness from an unexpected place, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like Bodhi. Right, Bill?
Yes.
Well, you know what? Awe is, like when I'm over here and I'm playing with baby D, that's a totally different thing when there's something with adversity that pulls when the rug is pulled right out from underneath me. That's a whole different challenge for me. To like you say with with Russell Crowe seeing the little bird, or you see a dragonfly or a butterfly, like I it was like on You've Got Mail, that I was on a tram or something, and a monarch butterfly came flying through, and I just thought, that's the craziest thing. This is just like a movie. That's awe and that's wonder. It's when the rug is pulled out from under me, of going back to held inside of both safety and some necessary conflict at the same time. That I know God's there, but at times it sure doesn't feel like it. Like the rug's just like all of a sudden I just got caught off guard.
Mm. Mm.
That's the challenge for me.
But as we said, these ambushes, quote unquote, can be both out of great suffering or out of great love. They can come from both directions. And so what is hitting you today? The key to life is to be willing to be open to whatever presents in the moment, whatever it happens to be, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, and not bring our preferences in and judge them, but just let the moment be enough. Let it be just this. Just be with the moment. Keep leaning into the moment, which is the only place we're going to find the healing of God's presence if it's required. So that's what we're trying to do contemplatively, is not judge the moment, be part of the moment. Let the moment be.
I like that thought. So if the moment sucks,
Let it be.
just let it suck. And it's our resistance to the moment that adds suffering to the suckiness of the moment.
Yep.
And
Our
like,
expectations.
say that again, John.
Our expectations.
Expectations, right? And if we could, and I like the last part you said there, to invite God into the suffering, and the only way he can be healing in the suffering is for me to be present to the suffering and then invite him in that space. And that's this, right? Just this.
Just this. The only place we can ever access God is right here and right now. If right here and right now is painful, what we want to do is exit. We want to get away from the pain. But as soon as we do that, by whatever means we do that, whether it's just mentally moving away, or whether it's inebriating ourselves, or in any way changing our consciousness to try to get out of the moment, we're also taking ourselves away from the only healing presence that exists, and the only place that can be accessed. And so to stay present to the moment is the key. We're not always going to be able to do that. Some moments are so traumatic that we're going to check out. It's a reflex. We're not going to have any choice in the matter. But then what's our recovery time? Can we circle back around and then come back? Or do we take a decade off? That's going to be the key, is to, what's our recovery time? As we realize more and more that God is accessed here and now contemplatively, then we realize we need to come back to the moment. We need to re-engage, reconnect if we're going to heal.
Like I was reading, I am here. When I remember that God is here with me, then I can walk through that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to add to William's comment about suffering, because what came to mind was my daughter. 10 years ago. So she was 11 years old. And so you need these vaccines, right? You need like 4 or 5 of them. And she was crying an hour before the vaccines and out an hour after. So go forward 10 years. She comes home for Thanksgiving. So she was crying because of the shots. They were painful. She was suffering. She comes home and she has like 3 or 4 holes here. The cartilage of your ear, right? And 3 or 4 here. And then 1 on the nose. And I said to her, did it not hurt? Yes, it did. So did you cry? No. There was no suffering. And that was very stark, concrete to me. There was no suffering, but it was the circumstance. It was even more painful to.
It was worse. Yeah.
Right. To your cartilage and your nose, really. So that's the difference to me. I think what the point being is that it's the circumstance of the pain of the needle, but there was no suffering because of that attitude change. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can. This gets back down to Viktor Frankl too, right? That man's search for meaning. If we can attach meaning to the suffering, then it becomes overcomable. And so the meaning that your daughter attached to getting pierced was very different than the meaning she attached to getting stuck by a hypodermic. And so it's there was a means to an end there that changed the suffering. Just like the pain that we're willing to endure in a workout routine or studying or diet or whatever it is, we want to get to an outcome and we're willing to go through the pain. In fact, the pain tells us that we're actually getting someplace. We're actually making some tracks. And so there's virtue and meaning in it, and it is survivable and even desirable. But not if there's no meaning attached to it. Of course not.
What was the name of the Viktor Frankl piece again, Dave?
Well, the book where he puts all this out is called Man's Search for Meaning.
That's it. Yes.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
So which also segue into saying, yes, that, meaning in our lives, purpose in our lives takes away the suffering despite the circumstances.
And I don't know that it actually takes it away, but it certainly makes it overcomable. It makes it bearable. We can go through it if there's meaning attached to it. So, but it still hurts. I mean, suffering's going to hurt. Pain is going to hurt, no matter what. But the pain is also what can open up these vistas for us, just like the great love can. And since they come unexpectedly on us, that's the ambush. And that's what Richard Rohr, and you can disagree with him if you like, but he says, I don't know how this process gets started any other way than some sort of ambush where the curtain is pulled back and suddenly you see that there's another possibility outside of your egoic bubble that really does exist. And it's someplace you can go. And contemplation is going to be the vehicle that will take you there. So that's the case that he's building.
So then you have I was just going to say, you have circumstances the opposite. I was thinking too, of somebody that maybe is so afraid of any kind of surprise in their life where they just close off their life to love, to everything is routine, everything is planned, until they get caught in a snowstorm in their car, and that's not planned. They can't, oh my gosh, something's now happened that they can't prepare for. But I mean, they're not going to have maybe those awe moments if they're so guarded with walls around them to protect them from anything that might be painful in their life. So in that sense, maybe those ambushes will still happen, but might be fewer and far between of the awe that they might be getting if they were more open to life. And I don't know, I guess people are different stages of being open or closed, depending on what they've been through. Maybe if they've been through traumas, they try very hard to keep the walls up. And that's could be a lonely life, or just a very quiet, sedate type life where nothing affects you. You surrender to nothing around you and you're just blocked off from everything. But that's a different kind of hell in a sense, really. I don't know, I'm a rock, I'm an island, the whole thing, you know, I don't need anybody kind of a thing. It's kind of, could be a different perspective.
I
Where's
think
the awe in that?
I think the ambush would sneak up on you much more
I think
slowly.
it would. There's got to be some sense of surprise, like when they get caught in that snowstorm or they have a flat tire in the wrong neighborhood or whatever it is. Yeah, they're going to get ambushed some way. Life's going to mug them somewhere when they're not expecting it. That's a different kind of ambush, though, probably.
Well, everybody's going to get ambushed. The question is, are we ready to see it in this light? Or are we just going to fight it? Are we going to assign blame? Are we going to push against it and just, just rail against it, rage at the machine,
Or be a victim or
and be a
something, right?
victim, or are we going to let it actually do its work and have it show us that there is something beyond everything that we've already imagined in our quest for certainty, which of course we never get, but we can imagine and play along with the illusion that we can control things that well. Out of our fear.
I had a spiritual advisor early on, about 30 years ago, that he said, I want you to think about two things, John. And I said, what's that? He says, this is what it is. He says, don't place blame, don't withhold approval. And it took me a long time to let that sink in. But once it did, it really made a lot of sense. It took me out of the the blame game. It took me out of the judging territory, and kind of separated myself. Helped to separate myself, because I did that a lot. So those things have changed.
But think about it, John. Think about how free you need to be not to place blame or withhold approval.
Exactly.
I mean, you have to have a certain self-confidence. You have to know who you are, that you can celebrate someone else's achievements and praise them and not feel like it's either taking the light off of you or diminishing you in any way, and not to deflect with blame, your own responsibility or what the moment might be showing you and teaching you. That's real freedom, to be able to just do those two things. So I think your friend really put his finger on two very important monikers or identifiers of this kind of freedom, this transformation that we're talking about.
He had
That's really,
spent 7 years
really
in
good.
a monastery.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
wanted to become a priest, and then he decided to get married, and so that didn't happen. But yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Lori, I'm sorry. I was really certain that we were going to get to just the second paragraph and be able to talk about what you wanted to talk about, but we didn't get there this week, but we will definitely get there next week. I mean, we kind of talked around the edges of it a little bit, but we'll hit it right on the head next time and talk about, because you're right, that's a real sticky issue, and we need to flesh that out a little bit. So we'll put our attention on those two paragraphs next week, and hopefully a few more. But wow, this is a lot more discussion than I expected just from Hopkins' poem. So this is really cool. Great stuff. Thanks, everyone. All right, Scotty, over to you, buddy.
Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to be here with each other and with you, and exploring and learning and receiving unexpected revelation and ambushes and so many different elements to our day and our life and our existence. And sometimes it's just more than we can process without taking the time to get quiet before you. So my prayer tonight is that we find a quiet place, reflect on what we've read and shared with each other tonight, and your truth as you bring it to our minds, totally trusting in you for the direction and the way that our life should travel, inspired by your promises and your declarations of who we are and what we should mean to each other as we enjoy this journey through life. So, Father, we're just so grateful. We want to give our thanks, say our prayers, and ask for a blessing, and thank you for the blessing in advance of just coming closer together in relationship and community as we love and support each other as inspired by you. In your holy, precious name, Lord Jesus, we pray this, and we give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
Thank you, Scotty.
Amen, everyone.
Amen.
All right.
And all right,
See you
guys.
Sunday.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, good night, good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
All right. Good night, Sharon.
Good night, David.
And Jordana and Linda. See you guys this weekend.
All right.
Oh, won't see you, Jordana, but you'll see us.
Yeah, I'll see you guys.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.